Hi, I'm Matt Williams. Welcome to Glimpses. My guest today is a gifted film, television, and stage actor and passionate advocate of the arts. He has appeared on Broadway, off-Broadway, and recurring roles on The Sopranos, Oz, and is currently on the Paramount Plus Fatal Attraction series. And very importantly, he is a founder of the acclaimed LAByrinth Theater Company. I'm very excited to have him on this podcast. Gary Perez, welcome to Glimpses.
Thank you very much, Matt. I'm excited to be here.
Good. So let's talk about Lab. It started out Latino Actors Base.
That's correct. That was my era.
That was your era. And
That's right.
Talk about the original intent of Lab.
Oh, wow. Well, the original intent, I had gotten involved in a theater company here in New York City called Circle Rep. And that was back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Right.
And
one of my favorite theater companies of all time,
Yeah.
Lanford Wilson and
yes,
yes,
so
all those
many
people.
wonderful actors that
there.
come out of there, writers, all kinds. Every single department that you can think of was working out of Circle Rep. I would say that I may have become the first Puerto Rican member that they had, and I was like, "What's going on here?" And so at that time, or shortly thereafter, there was some controversy going on in the Broadway world and in the off-Broadway world, where not a lot of Latinos were getting involved in anything, and so I was also involved with a company, a theater, not really a company, called Intar. And I was just really starting out. It was like I said, the early 90s. At that theater company, there was a gentleman by the name of Max Ferra, may he rest in peace, and he, Cuban-American. Sorry, he was Cuban-born and had moved here in the 60s. And he took a liking to me, and he would invite me up to clear out his files. And I saw like headshots of Jimmy Smits and Brad Pitt. And I'm sorry, not Brad Pitt.
He's Puerto Rican, right?
Yeah, Brad Pitt is Puerto Rican. He changed his name over. I can't remember his name, but he's also a Latino guy. Out of the Bay Area, and I always forget names, but not faces. And in any case, so many different actors who were in that file, and I'm like, man, where are they? And so at one point, I teamed up with a good friend of mine. We had been doing this other program called Jersey Playwrights of New Jersey Playwrights, something Playwrights of New Jersey, and it was John Ortiz, and we just hit it off splendidly, and so we just had this idea to kind of maybe start our own company. And I wanted to model it after what Circle Rep was doing, which was they would have a new production, a workshop production happening every single weekend, something completely new. So while one was up for the weekend, another one was in rehearsal. Yeah, it involved every single department. It was lighting, set design, costume design. All the departments were involved, and they had terrific actors, as you know. And it was donations. So there was a suggested donation of, I think it was $10, and the house would always get packed, and it would just play that weekend. And so I thought, wow, that's a great concept to start with. And that was the idea that I had gone into with Latino Actors Base at that time.
Okay, Latino actors. So you had your base, and then the lab became the LAByrinth Theater Company. When did that happen, and why did that happen?
It was shortly after. I mean, we had already had some non-Latinos in it, but we had made exceptions. We had wonderful non-Latino participants like David Deblinger, who was part of our crew of the founding members.
Right.
And then some of the original members were people like Sam Rockwell and another guy named William Rothline and a few other cats. And because of that, we just kind of figured, well, we want to open up because we want to be a microcosm of New York City, and really show the world who we are based on what the city dynamics are, not just this like.
And you are New York City born.
I am, yes.
And a couple podcasts ago, I had David Zayas on here.
Yes.
And I learned that you and David Zayas are longtime buddies from the same hood.
Yeah,
It's
I
like
know
since the fifth grade or something.
Correct. Yeah, I know David since fifth grade. He's truly my oldest friend.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And you're both actors, and the fact that you grew up in New York, you're New York born and bred. You were talking about the microcosm of New York being reflected in LAByrinth Theater Company, and I think that's really true. There's an edge. There's a quality to LAByrinth productions that are just different than every other production in the city.
It's
right?
true. Yeah.
You made your Broadway debut this year.
This year.
You're a working actor forever. You've been on so many things, and this year you got to Broadway in the Pulitzer Prize-winning play Between Riverside and Crazy, written by the amazing Stephen Adley Gurgis.
Correct.
So what was that like? I mean, that was a long journey to go from off-Broadway to get it to Broadway, right?
Yeah, I was not involved in any of that. This was something that happened out of the clear blue, like it just fell on my lap like a gift from heaven, just like whop. And it's an interesting thing to speak about because you're in this business for as long as I've been, which is a good amount of time at this point. I started in this business at 25 or so. Started late by all considerations, but I've been grinding. And, trying to get my...
Well, you define working actor. You're always working.
Yeah, this is true.
I mean, that's good.
Yeah,
that's
no, it's a very good thing. And I'm truly grateful to all that. But this, I had... every actor, I think, thinks about being on Broadway at some point, but nobody ever realizes how that's going to happen or how it can happen, or you think it's going to be some audition and you're going to get, the whole waiting thing, and it's going to happen like this, and well. The truth of the matter is I went to go see a friend of mine, her last performance. Her name is Liza Colon, which is David Zayas' wife.
Liza Colon Zayas,
yes. And so it was her last performance because she was going to go shoot the bear in Chicago. And so it was a Friday night before New Year's. So everybody had off the next day, which was Saturday, New Year's Eve. And so I went to see the show, and because it was her last night, they were celebrating her, and because they had the next day off, they all went to party. And so while I'm at this event, this party wasn't really an event, it was just a little get-together to wish her goodbye. Everybody's there, and I get into this little conversation with Michael Rispoli, who's the actor playing the lieutenant. And he says, yeah, Gary, they don't think I'm leaving. I keep telling them I'm fucking leaving, this and that, but they don't pay attention to me. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah, I've been telling them for like months that I have to have this other gig, whatever. And I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about, really. But he says, I got to go, and they haven't replaced me yet. They haven't found a replacement. So I don't really think too much of it. I thought, that's kind of a weird situation, but I didn't. So the weekend goes by, New Year's happens, Monday goes by, and on Tuesday, because I'm friends with Stephen Gurgis, I just decided to text him just with no intention of anything. So I'm like, hey, man, who's going to be replacing Michael Rispoli? And he texts me back. Why, he's leaving? Can you imagine? So I'm like, well, that's what he says. And he writes back. He said, well, I guess they're going to promote the understudy. And that was the end. And then like an hour later, he texts me again and he says, if they're auditioning, should I put your name in the hat? And I'm like, yeah, why not? You know how auditions go, Matt. So it's like,
Yeah.
sure, I'll audition. Well, that's it. The next day, which is Wednesday morning, I get an email from my agents here in New York asking me if I was interested and available to replace Michael Rispoli. It would be replacing, not the understudy, it would be replacing. And I said, yeah, of course I'm interested, and I am available, but I would love to see a script. Because one thing seeing a play,
Right.
the flesh and blood on stage. It's another thing reading the piece and sort of devouring it in a different way. And I never get a script. And then the whole day goes by, and that evening, about 8 p.m., I get a direct email from casting saying, would you be available to audition tomorrow, Thursday? I said, sure, 4 p.m. Here are the 5 pages of sides. It's still no script. So I do the audition via Zoom. We were sort of at the end of the heart of pandemic,
Right.
the beginning of the end, kind of. And I did the audition. They gave me some notes. I did another pass, and that was it. And an hour later, I get a FaceTime call from Mr. Gierkes, and he's saying, "Hey, do you know, there's gonna be a lot of work involved in this. So you think you might be up for it?" I said, "Well, Steve, my work ethic is pretty good. I know how to get my hands dirty, and I roll up my sleeves." And he goes, "Yeah, 'cause you're the guy. You're the guy." And I was like, "Oh, really? They want me?" He's like, "Yeah, you're the one." And I was like, "Yeah." And then I didn't get any offer until late that night, an official offer. And then I was at work the very next day, Friday at 3 p.m.
Wow. So this, I guess, this is for all the actors listening to this. Go to parties.
Exactly.
go to parties and bump into people leaving shows.
But Matt, as how that fell into my lap, it was the hardest job I ever encountered.
Was it the 8 performances a week, or just the intensity of the play?
Well,
Or
there was a lot of pressure for me to go on. I didn't realize that there was an equity rule that I didn't know about. Maybe I'm misquoting it, but that the understudy can only go on 10 performances before they have to offer the understudy the job.
Got it.
So, according to the way this went down, they were putting quite a bit of pressure on me to get on.
to get in there, right?
Yeah, and there are only 2 scenes that I'm in, but the first scene is 33 minutes long. It's basically a 1-act play. The second scene in the second act is 22 minutes long, and I drive both of those scenes, and it was intense. And the way Stephen has written that character, the lines just were like, designed for wreaking havoc in the brain. And just between you and I and everybody that's watching, I was pacing up and down my apartment trying to figure out how I could get out of this without losing my friendships, and like hoping I get COVID, and like all kinds of, like, oh my God, it was frightening.
Broadway debut or COVID?
Yeah.
I'm choosing COVID.
Yeah, that's how frightened I was.
Well, let's talk about that. I want to talk about that. What is your greatest fear as an actor? Because I see this all the time, that doubt is a writer's constant companion. Every morning you wake up and that little doubt demon sitting on your shoulder, whispering in your ear, going, "This isn't very good. You're not smart enough to write this. No one's going to like this. Why are you?" And you just bat that little demon away and write. What is your demon, and how do you get rid of that little doubt demon when you are pacing in your apartment?
Well, I didn't get COVID.
So you had to go on.
Didn't get sick at all, and I'm a pretty healthy guy, so I was like, the big fear was messing up. I'm like a terrible perfectionist to some degree, and maybe even a little bit of a control freak. So I couldn't bring the rest of the cast down. There was so many things to remember, and then it was mainly
Yeah.
that doubt of messing up. That can I mess up? How do I know these lines? And I got to say that the first few performances were easier than the others because I knew the thrust of the scene. I knew more or less what I was going to be saying, and yet my lines weren't down perfect. Just and as I kept on going, of course, I kept studying my lines. And then the next set of performances were of me going, oh, I said that wrong in the quickest of moments. Like, oh, how can I fix that? This kind of thing. And just keep moving forward. And there was one particular performance that was really tough for me, and it was I had just gone up on lines badly, and I just got so upset at myself on stage, and I just made up stuff that made no sense, but everybody, I was still in the scene.
Yeah.
And I just railed at the two other characters that are on the stage with me, and then I got off stage, and Mr. Stephen McKinley Henderson came up to me. He says, "Gary, you have to forgive yourself right away when you're on stage because nobody else knew but you.
Yes.
And you got
Yes.
so angry with yourself that you made it worse for everyone." And I said, "Thank you for saying that." And he hugged me, and then I went away and I went to a bar and I sat at the bar where nobody was at. It was just one of those quiet nights. It was perfect in a little corner. And I did this like, just silently screaming. And it was that night I had a dream with my great grandfather who I'd never dreamt with before. And he's long gone. And he was looking for a job. And when I woke up the next morning, other than knowing that I had dreamt about him, I also had these two other strategies that I wanted to develop for myself on stage to remember. One was drawing the beginning of a word, like putting a letter on my knuckle here. That would help me remember what I needed to do. And I would look at it in this one moment that I had where I would tap Mr. Henderson on his shoulders while he was lying on the bed. I'd go like this, and I'd look at it right there because, I could face upstage at that
Yeah.
point, and I'd tap it. So I'd make sure that I was moving on to the next thing. But the bigger thing is that my great grandfather wanted this job. And I was like, "Job? You got it. I'm going to bring you on stage with me every night from now on." And from that point on, my performances, I would say, were a little bit more well executed.
That's goosebump time right there. That's goosebump time. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
That's great.
So I had asked my room partner, which was Mr. Henderson, if he didn't mind, I put my great grandfather's photograph up, and he goes, "No, go right ahead." It was great. It was really
That's
great.
fantastic. So I know my wife did a tour, was on Broadway in Zorba, and did a tour for 2 or 3 years of 8 performances a week. When you're on Broadway and you're doing 8 performances a week, every audience is different. Every night is different. Every matinee is a little different than the night before. Is that like surfing? I mean, how do you ride each audience? Because some, I'm sure, laugh more than others. Some are restless. How do you do that? How do you handle that?
Well, I think it's pretty similar to every actor that I know of, just kind of riding that wave, so to speak. But with this particular show, it was really, really tough. There's certain shows that flow easy and you just want to get in there and do it again and do it again. And this show was like, wow, this is a monster of a show. Everybody was tired, and it was taking a toll on everybody. And I think that's just not a reflection of the play necessarily, but a reflection upon the actors who are committed to bringing it every night the way it needs to be brought. And I don't think it had anything to do with Broadway, but the caliber of actor that we're dealing with. And they're just right up there.
Yeah.
And there was a huge level of consistency, I would say, amongst everybody. So the target was very, very similar, and it was just the audience that was really changing the flow of things. And for me, people enjoyed talking back at me quite a bit, especially from the front row, and it was just really odd. So I was ready for anything, actually, and they just loved commenting at me. And at one point, I have this confrontation with the guy who plays the son, which was played by Common, and he would like downstage and come face to face. And on one night, somebody said, "Check him, Common," and we just have to hold, like, don't laugh,
Yeah.
don't laugh. And another night, somebody said, "Hit him," like for him to hit me.
So that's like the groundlings in Shakespeare's talking to the actors. And
Yeah.
let me ask you this. If you had to sum up in one word, what makes a good actor, what would that one word be?
Consistency.
Consistency.
Yes.
Okay.
I use that word because I feel like when an actor has a level of consistency in either their performance or in or their work ethic, that you can rely. It's like, to me, I love going to restaurants, and I'll go to a restaurant often if they have a great level of consistency. And for example, Mr. Henderson, he'd deliver that hamburger the same way every night. Every night. There was no way. He had he was right there on the mark, and his line was in the same, like, cadence. And so there's, if you can rely on that, I'd take a consistent actor any day over an actor who is occasionally brilliant.
Yeah, flashes of brilliance.
Yeah.
Well, this is a quote I found. Acting is basically being instinctive. It's about honesty. It's about truthful behavior. Remember George Burns, the old
Yes.
comedian,
Cigar.
Yeah, cigar. George Burns had this quote: "Acting is all about honesty. If you can fake that, you got it made." And I thought, isn't that a brilliant quote?
Yeah.
Faking honesty. That's perfect.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. To me, that's a great quote because I didn't have any formal training on acting. I didn't study anywhere. So, like, a lot of what I have discovered are my observation of people and observation of my idiosyncratic self,
yep.
and family, and where I come from. And I have a really nice range of people that I've known throughout my life. So I feel like I know the gutter right up to the glamour. And so all my
That's
brothers.
the title of your book.
I
Gutter,
love that.
Gutter to the glamour. There you go.
All my brothers are in law enforcement, so like all the cops and kind of New York types, all the city types are my brothers. Some reflection of my brothers filtered through me.
Which is fascinating because David Zayas was a cop.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've got all these police officers in your life.
And all the bad guys in my life are my dad. Sorry, Dad. Who's not a bad guy at all, but he used to have quite a temper, and his whole manner of being was consistent with, like, oh, he could be a bad guy.
Yeah, tough. Yeah. Now you've worked with John Patrick Shanley, Lynn Nottage, all these really terrific writers. When you pick up a script and you read it through the first time, what is it about the script that speaks to you? What gives you that little spark or that little kind of nudge that says this has got something?
Yeah, one of two things. One is that it touches me on a personal level that I can understand. And the other is on the opposite side of that, which is something that I don't know, that is foreign to me, that I would like to touch.
Oh, that's interesting.
And either way, I always like to filter whatever I do through me. So if the character has an accent. I do a lot of Spanish accents because my last name is Perez, so that's what to go out for. I actually enjoy doing accents, but that's neither here nor there. But if the character has an accent, born in a place where I never came from, and has a one eye and a hook, I filter that through. Well, how would I have behaved my entire life, or since the point of having these conditions?
Right.
How would I say these lines because of that limitation or
Right. Condition. Or what?
condition? Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. So, and this may be too simple a question, but some actors work from the outside in, others work from the inside out. Sometimes it's an amalgamation of the two, and it just happens organically.
Yeah.
You sound like you're a visceral actor. Something in your gut goes off and says, "This is right." Is that correct?
Yes, yes. But it always starts with an external aspect. So whenever I get an audition sides, I always think to myself, what is he wearing and what does he sound like? And
Okay.
even though I don't really make any changes, but I'm a big wardrobe guy, so like I have to find the right outfit. I have these, I'm a bi-coastal creature, so L.A. and New York. So I have like my police jacket, my detective leather. I have my work shirt, my plaid shirt that I wear for certain things, and I just carry those back and forth just in case. But I always try to figure out, what does he look like? What is he wearing? And what does he then sound like? Because there's the socioeconomic condition to
Right.
what someone sounds like. And once I get those, then I can start putting together the scene.
Right. Okay. Okay. So if I'm 23 years old, I've just graduated from acting program in the Midwest, and I come to New York, and I come to Gary Perez for advice and say, Gary, what should I do to be a working actor? What would you say to me?
Man, get on the grind and get online. Wow, that's a tough question. I think that anyone getting into this industry has, first of all, has got to love it. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. And I think that a lot of actors feel like as you go on in the career, that things somehow get easier or better, for like a better term. And I think actors who are just starting out, they're in the best place they're ever going to be in. This is like, because it only gets more challenging.
Yes.
And I'm a huge believer in that this industry is a fan-based industry. And for those reasons, when you go in on things, you have to bring your A game all the time, which is why I respect the cast that I was working with on Broadway, because like I said, they were just bringing it every night, and they were exhausted because they were bringing it every night. And that's what you have to do. You in this industry, I feel like you can't afford to suck.
Yeah.
You have to either get a new fan or re-up an old fan. And hopefully it's forgivable if you do mess up and have a bad day. Everybody's entitled to having a bad day, but you hope that the casting, or the buyers, as I like to call them, can forget that one bad day and,
Right.
and forgive and sort of like give you a pass on that. But for in terms of advice, someone coming in from wherever, it's just like, be in it for the long haul. Put a smile on your face. Don't get negative on yourself,
Right.
and live life to the fullest, because I believe when you are out there and living life to the fullest is when you start to see things happening for yourself. You can't just sit back and wait for things to happen. You just got to go out there and grab it and have fun and smile and make other people smile.
Right. So when you are obviously in a Broadway house, you're filling the house. It's however many hundreds or even 1,000 or so people. And then you're in front of the camera. How do you make that adjustment? How is there a gear shift where Gary goes, "Uh-oh, I'm going into a lower gear, I'm going into a higher gear"? What is that shift that occurs when you go from the stage to the intimacy of a scene with a camera?
Right. I love this question because I'm all about understanding playing spaces, and I feel like you can't afford to not understand a playing space when you are an actor or any performing art. Or anybody in the performing arts, specifically actors, possibly dancers, but even opera singers who wind up on different types of houses.
Right.
Some of them are huge, huge opera houses, and some of them are smaller. And to be able to calibrate the instrument, I feel like is part of the art form, to understand how to make those changes within the instrument and how to then assess the condition of the playing space and how that is going to reflect off of your body, your instrument, in terms of gesture, and where you wouldn't play a 1,000-seat house the way you would a 99-seat house. Likewise, you wouldn't play an extreme close-up, a choker shot the way you would a 99-seat house, or even just a single. So to understand all those playing spaces and to be able to calibrate on the fly even
Yes.
is just, I love doing that. It's so challenging, and I feel that that's a part of the art form that you are working towards in kind of working through this perfection, or looking for that perfection and being an artist.
The operative phrase, I love doing that. If you don't love doing what you're doing, it's a pretty miserable existence.
Yeah.
To put yourself through what theater people, actors, directors, dancers, singers have to do, it's tough.
Yeah.
The discipline that it takes.
Yeah, and that's an important thing, discipline, because I find that many actors don't practice as much as the other art forms. A singer practicing all day, dancers, hours, musicians, chefs, painters, actors. If they have an audition, maybe they go in a scene study class. This kind of thing, but they're not taking something and practicing with it.
Right.
Using a camera to play the space and understand the limitations of that space. One of the things I do when I get on a stage, and mind you, I don't do stage work that often, but whenever I do, whether it be a reading or a play, I like to get somebody in the back and say, "Can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
What about here? What about here?" Just like understand what
Modulate, yeah.
exactly, and I'll know where my limit is, and then I know I can come down that low, and somebody will still hear me, and so I just know what my boundaries are. So, and working for a camera is something that's super fascinating to me. Understanding the subtleties and the nuances of that playing space is something that I just am utterly fascinated by and am studying it all the time.
Is there a spiritual aspect to your creating? In a previous podcast, we were talking about the theater, or just the theater in general being a sacred space. Is there any spiritual aspect? And I'm not talking religious dogma.
Right.
I'm not that. Just, do you ever tap into, or do you ever feel or guided by the daemon, the spirit, the muse, whatever you want to call it? I don't know.
Right.
But
Duende. my duende. Well, I feel like I'm always tapped into it. I coach actors often, and sometimes when I get goosebumps talking to them, and I'll say something to them, and I'll go like, "Oh wow, I got goosebumps," and so it might be right, you know.
When you take your great grandfather into the theater with you, that's goosebumps.
Exactly, and many times an actor that I've been working with will say, "Man, Gary, you were channeling from something." So whether I realize it or not, I know that I'm tapped into something otherworldly, and I appreciate it. And I like to keep a positive environment no matter what. I never bring my day into the work. No matter what, everybody's going through stuff. Everybody's going through, and it's all relative. So it's not like yours is worse than mine.
Right.
It's all so relative what is happening in one's life at the time. So I'm always bring my best foot forward. Always try to arrive early, not just on time, but early.
Right.
I and giving good energy out so that everyone I try to become infectious, so that everyone can be there for me. And the higher up on the cast list, or the lower I am on the cast list, like I've had the privilege of being on a number 2 on a cast, and then in those places when you can know what kind of power you can have in terms of giving, not in terms of like, oh, me, I'm a star, I'm number 2 on the cast list. No,
Right.
nothing like that. I'm talking about being able to affect I'm getting goosebumps right now. The entire crew,
Right.
the team that is involved in doing this project, by giving them my energy.
And it is all about energy, especially on a set, a film set.
Oh, yeah.
And people don't realize it's not just the actors, it's the AD, it's the grip, it's props, and all that energy is feeding the scene. And if you have one person who is pissed off or in a negative, that energy ripples across the set. So what you're talking about is very important. I used to very consciously, when I was doing a lot of television, go down there, and we can call it praying or whatever you want to call it, but I'd kind of bless the space and just say that, just clear any darkness, so that when the actors and the crew come in, I want them to feel that positive energy.
Yeah.
And that is tangible. You feel it.
Yes.
You feel it.
Yes, I mean, I think you go and bless. I think the blessing is also exists in coming in and saying, "Hey, thanks for being here. Hey, it's great to see you. What's
Yeah.
going on? Hey," and just having that great enthusiasm, even if it's 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
We're all
That's it.
here.
That's it. Well, this podcast is called Glimpses, and the book that I've written is called Glimpses, and it's about finding little glimpses of God. And by God, I'm not talking about the white-haired guy on the clouds. I'm talking about moments of grace and goodness and mercy and tenderness.
Oh, yeah.
And as you go about your day, or you're on a set, or you're doing a Broadway play, do you see glimpses in the course of your day?
Matt, I see it everywhere, because I feel like I don't want to get hokey, but I feel like God exists in every aspect, and what we can't see. I see God in you, and I see God between us.
Yes.
And the beauty of having this microphone and these cameras here, the technology behind it, that's all God. This lighting, this structure, but beyond that, on a more sort of person to person thing, I feel like if you don't have the let's just say a bad guy, or someone who's not seemingly favorable, well, that's God too, because in order to understand that is, for lack of a better term, dark, we won't be able to understand what light is. And so we need to have the contrasts that exist in life to understand that it is all God. Now, there's a lot of darkness in the world right now, and my heart goes out to many places where there's trouble. But one would hope that that kindness is something that's going to permeate and take over, and that's what we need.
Gary, I believe that so completely. To me, kindness is like dropping a pebble in a lake, and it just ripples out and it ripples out. And it doesn't have to be on a grand scale. Simple kindness on the street, or kindness, and it has to start somewhere. And so let it start with me as I go through my day, and let it ripple out to you, and you'll ripple it out to others. And it's got to start somewhere. And I agree with you so wholeheartedly. There's so much darkness, but the darkness helps define the light, and we got to bring the light into the world. We really do. And
Absolutely.
however we do that, as a performer, as a human being, as a father, as a husband, as a son, how do we bring that light into the world?
Yeah. Yeah. By my part, I kind of, in the elevator, force people to say goodnight, hold the door for them, good night, even if I know I'm not going to get a good night or,
It's okay, because kindness is contagious.
Yeah,
It is.
yeah.
It does. It rubs off.
smile at them as I'm walking by people, I like to try to pull one out of them, and it's okay if it doesn't happen. And, I used to get a little bit upset about, holding the door for somebody, for example, and they wouldn't say thank you. And I used to be like, "You're welcome," like all attitude, right? And then I was like, "But what are you doing?" Like, why? If you're holding the door, are you looking for something?
Yes.
And I was like, No, I'm holding the door because I am that kind of human. And if they say thank you, great. If they don't, great.
Well, Gary, keep holding the door open.
I certainly will. Thank you, Matt, for opening the door for me.
All right. And thank you for being on Glimpses. That's it for this podcast. And as you go about your day, I encourage you all to take the time to look around and catch a glimpse. My friends, thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Glimpses. Speaking of, Glimpses is now available for purchase at your online retailer of choice. And the best part? Every penny earned will be going to charities who support children in need. You can get your copy in the link below.